Thank you for joining today's Teaching with Technology Brown Bag session, Big Changes from Small Techniques. Our presenters for today are Dr. Linda McCauley and Dr. Kim McLeod from the ETI. To start us off today's session is Dr. McLeod.
Thank you everyone for joining us. We have here our goals for today. We're going to explain to you what we mean by this term in small instructional strategies. And then we're going to spend some time talking about some examples of core content, connection, and catalyst strategies. If you're joining us in person today, our goals are listed on the board for you to take a look at throughout the presentation. If you are joining us virtually, they will be added as a pinned comment into the chat for you to revisit as you'd like. Dr. McCauley and I not only are here today to share about this topic because Dr. McCauley and I both have plenty of experience in the field of education. Dr. McCauley has over 30 years and I myself have over 10 years. So this isn't just something that we, read about and want to share about, but more so something that we've practiced in classrooms with learners. We believe in because we've seen the impact of these strategies, and we hope that you get some strategies out of today that you might be able to try yourselves as well. So thanks for joining us, and we will move into our first, the first thing that we're going to do together, rather than just getting into the definitions, is we're going to try out one of these small instructional strategies that we mentioned. We're just going to jump right into one. So this one is called Zoom In. It's personally a strategy I have used many times that I really enjoy using. It's so flexible in how you can apply it. So here's an image we have here. It's a very zoomed in image of a larger image that we'll see in a moment. And I'm going to first just ask you to just independently reflect. What are you noticing? What are you thinking about as you're seeing this part of the image? Now we've zoomed out to see a little bit more. And again, I'll pause and just ask you to take a moment. What are you thinking about? What are you noticing? What's coming to mind as you're viewing this portion of the image? And then lastly, we will zoom out to the full image. This is a Rembrandt painting. You can see the portions we were looking at toward the center. And then at this point, I'm going to ask you to again think on your own for a moment. What are you thinking about? What are you noticing? What's coming to mind? And how has your thinking changed across the three images that we've shared with you? And so the next thing we're going to share is just to kind of remind you of what we saw, the three images in sequence right next to each other. Take a moment. If anyone's up for sharing their thinking, we would love to hear it.
We have one in the chat so far that putting it into the context with the larger image helped it not be so gross. Someone else said, I thought it was surgery in the first pic, and then I thought I was right. And then the third picture, I realized what I was seeing, that it was training on a body.
As we're waiting for any other answers to come in, I'll just speak to this strategy a little bit. It's interesting, the responses we got, were a bit varied from each other, the two. The nice thing about this instructional strategy is that you'll notice that you won't always get learners, sharing the same thing. Different ideas are going to come up for different people. So for example, if my instructional goals here were, I wanted to launch a discussion about anatomy, right? Maybe that's why I started on what the commenter called a gross image in this example. I zoomed out from there. But alternatively, say I wanted to talk about, the balance in medical education of learning from books versus learning, from real life or simulation experiences. Perhaps then my Zoom focus would have changed to zooming in maybe on the faces of the observers in the room or the instructor in the room as well, or the book. It might not be clear, but the book in the bottom right corner, right? That you're learning from text versus real life. So this is an example of a strategy that can be used incredibly flexibly. Learners will bring up things that you didn't even think of, so it will kind of invite other opportunities for discussion and talking points. Any ideas? I've used this with paintings before and photographs. Any other ideas in this unique context that we have here at USU? What types of images you might be able to use? Any ideas for types of images that might be used for this zoom in strategy? So other ideas, that kind of came up as we were brainstorming were, you could use this for charts or graphs. You could use this for any kind of like slides. If you think about, looking closer at cells or anything like that, any medical images. If you've, ever gone to or have maybe examples of MFP images, you might be able to use those to speak to if you want to zoom in on a certain process that's happening in a photo. There's many options. It's again why I like it so much. It's very flexible for you to design the instruction toward what you're looking to speak to.
Kim, I would add that this is one of those strategies, especially in a medical school, where we have a lot of images that I show students, and we tend to have these larger images with lots of labels and information on them. And the zoom in technique helps us really focus the learners in on what we want them to see and then slowly build that knowledge base by zooming out. So this first picture you showed may have been just on the thumb, and maybe you were talking about the structures within the thumb first to move to keep the students focused. But when you give them a larger image of everything, as you may have felt in the audience looking at this, it kind of distracts you the more you zoom out, as well as the more information you have in an image distracts the learner from your focus.
And if you want to learn more about this, it's actually called the signaling principle. So it allows you to focus in on what you want the learners to focus on and signal in. So you can always read more about that if you're interested in this strategy.
All right. Well, thank you very much to those of you that shared your thoughts. We're going to move in now to discussing actually what we mean by small instructional strategies now that we've tried one out.
And there's a question here. Did you ever go the other way, start zoomed out and zoomed in? Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that question. Yes, that's the nice thing about it is it's so flexible in that you can, you might zoom in or zoom out. The name of it zoom in, but don't be constrained by the title for sure. Thank you so much.
I'd absolutely go both ways. Excellent. So now that we've kind of set the stage and warmed up a little bit, we're going to take a moment now to explain what these strategies actually are and why you might want to use them in your teaching. Why small instructional strategies? These are all strategies that we will share today that have been developed by experts. They're evidence-based, highly effective, and very high impact. What makes them useful, why we say you should use small instructional strategies, is because they're just easier to implement because they're small. It's not full course redesign, so it doesn't feel quite so momentous to try some of these strategies out. And really, one of the biggest reasons we want to do this is because we know our learners need some help sometimes to build and sustain their attention. And we might think that technology is the reason our students are distracted and keeping learners from being focused on their learning. But actually, if we step back a bit and think about it, distractions have always been there from the beginning of time. Technology is just another one added in. But if we can use some of these strategies, we will be able to gain their attention and hopefully keep them focused on what we would like them to learn. So rather than removing those distractions or reducing distractions, we're going to use these strategies to help build and sustain their attention so that they stay engaged in what we would like them to focus on. So what are these instructional strategies? They are strategies that promote student learning. There are literally dozens, if not hundreds, of possible strategies that you can do just by starting small and very purposeful in the decisions that you make, in how you design your course, how you engage in your classroom, how you communicate with your students, and how you address challenges that arise in the day-to-day. When I first started as an educator 30 years ago, I received a bit of advice that sticks with me today, and that is do one thing awesome every day. And then if you do that year after year, after several years, everything you're doing every day is awesome. But you only took one little bite every day, one little small thing that you made excellent or awesome every day. So it wasn't so overwhelming, right? Much easier to think about one thing than everything all at once.
Thank you so much. So we're going to be sharing now some more examples. We saw zoom in to get us started. We're going to be sharing some more examples of strategies, and we I've kind of categorized them to steer their purpose. So the first type that we're going to look at are called core content strategies. We've also got a key here. So kind of as we see strategies, those in green are going to be those that are core content. These strategies are really aimed at getting our learners exposed to topics and repeating them to just kind of get them absorbed into their memory. They are building that foundational knowledge. They're really helping to get that knowledge memorized. We know there's a lot that they have to absorb in their time here. So that's what these strategies are targeting. The second type of strategy we're going to look at are called connection strategies. And so these go beyond just the absorption of information, but really ask or encourage students or our learners to interact with the material, to engage with it, to think about it, to apply it. So rather than just kind of the surface of absorbing it, learning it, doing something with it. And then our third type of strategy we're going to talk about are called catalyst strategies. And these are those strategies that are aimed at, learning the content is one thing, absorbing it is one thing, but actually being engaged in it, being motivated by what they're doing. That's what these catalyst strategies do. So we'll talk about all three in the rest of our time together.
So the first category or group of strategies is for core content. And again, these are the strategies that we are going to use to promote moving new learning from your short term to your long term memory. So these strategies really do build knowledge of foundational content. And obviously, that's really important in what we do here. So the three strategies that we're going to focus on today are interleaving, predicting, and plus one. So the first strategy is interleaving. This strategy is where you retrieve and practice older content with new content. When you implement this, some of the ways you can do that is you could take some older course content that you've already learned and incorporate it into things into the future, like quizzes, tests, projects. So you're making your learners remember what they did a couple weeks ago by making them retrieve it or grab it back from their memory so it stays fresh. Another way you can use interleaving is to open or close class with opportunities to actually retrieve and practice the things they've already learned so that it doesn't fall off. Just by interleaving this practice where practice, remember, practice, remember, practice, remember, very, very deliberately will allow your students those opportunities to solidify that learning, make those connections, and stick it in their long-term memory so they can have it when they need it in the future. The next one is predicting. And in this one, the strategy is where you encourage your learners to consider what's coming next. And the interesting thing about this strategy is that you might even ask them to do this predicting before they think they're ready. So it makes them get used to being comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? So when you implement this, you might at the end of class ask them to predict what's coming next. What are they going to learn next? What do they think it's going to be about? They didn't do the pre-work yet. They didn't do the reading, but you're still asking them to predict. And it also then primes your students for their pre-work or their learning that they're going to do that night on their own. So you're setting that stage, you're giving them some background, some ways to connect again to that other learning that they've done and predict what's coming next so that they keep engaged and they stay with it even after they leave the classroom that day. For the last strategy in this category, the plus one, this strategy allows your learners to recall and collect key ideas. And it really is a crowdsourcing of a lesson summary. So how do you do this? You take a chunk of your lesson or the whole lesson. First, the learner will write down everything they can remember from whatever you just did. So maybe it's a 10-minute lecture, maybe it's the whole class, whatever, or maybe a video they watched, whatever it is that you want them to do this plus one. They will write everything down they can remember. And then you will pass that paper that they've written all their notes on to their person next to them. That person is going to then either add a new detail to something that's not there yet, a new point that was missing, or they're going to make a connection between ideas. So basically, when they pass the paper, their neighbor is enhancing what is there. It's the plus one, right? They're enhancing what's there. And then you keep passing those papers as many times as you want or for however much time you have, until they then hand it back to the original owner. And then one last really important step is the person gets the paper back and adds any other notes they also want to remember, because now remember, they've just read 2 or 3 other people's papers. And then they might realize they're missing something else. And within a few minutes, they literally have a comprehensive note sheet from that chunk or that session or that video or whatever that you wanted them to take notes on. So it's really impactful for a very small amount of time.
We're going to move now into that second category of strategies, the connection strategies. As a reminder, these are those strategies that ask our learners to, okay, you got the basics, you got the information. Now let's dive deeper into it. Let's build those critical thinking skills, especially with, we know the content that they're being exposed to here is, it's a lot, it's new to them. So now it's getting them used to engaging with it and manipulating it in different ways. We have 3 strategies that are great examples of this. Again, there are many more to share, but our 3 today are going to be what makes you say that, think, pair, share, and headlines. So let's move on now to take a look at the first strategy called what makes you say that. The way this strategy works is that the instructor is going to ask questions, of their learners to probe for deeper thought. And it can be used anytime there's like a moment where you think to yourself, I think we need to dive deeper into that thing that was just said, whatever it was. So to implement this, it simply works like this. You as the instructor notice a moment when something is said by someone in the room that you think could use additional information or additional exploration. And so you simply pose the question, what makes you say that? You ask for more from the person who has responded. What makes you say that is the name, the name of the strategy. So that's the question that you could start with. But there are other ways to do this, right? Say more about that. What evidence do you have to support that? I really like and use a lot the question, can anyone else add to what so and so said, right? Like getting other ideas to maybe counter or compare thoughts about a certain topic. Again, this is a really simple strategy, but it has a lot of impact because it takes, maybe your question was closed, right? Maybe it was maybe it did warrant a one-word answer or yes, no, but now you can extend that question in a little bit more. This could be really specifically designed, when you're laying out your slides for the day, you might say to yourself, like, "Oop, this is a great place where I might, maybe do a little asterisk or something. I want to get some deeper thinking, or it might come up organically, right? Just as you notice something that comes up that you think could use a little bit more discussion. All right. Our second connection strategy, we'll move on from there, is called Think, Pair, Share. This is a strategy aimed at, again, getting that additional discussion, that deeper understanding of a topic through discussion, through getting our learners talking to each other. The implementation is in the name. So the name is Think, Pair, Share. So that's going to be our steps here. So the first step rather, is to pose a thoughtful question. The key here is that you as the instructor are making a move to ask a question that will get at that deeper level thinking. Again, if you ask a question that's more closed, that could be answered through yes or no, then the discussion won't be able to happen as well. So be selective, ask. So step 1, ask a question and just ask your learners to independently think about that question. From there, step 2 is, well, the word is pair. I should note, don't be constrained by that word either. If you want to make it small groups of 3, whatever it is, whatever makes sense for your space, ask your learners to pair or group up to discuss what they had to say about that topic and hear from others to be able to kind of extend on to what they were thinking. And then the last step, which is really key here, is to then invite your learners to come back together with the whole group and share their thinking. You might ask specifically, can anyone share what their group talked about, right? I don't want to hear your response. I want to hear what was the kind of collection of everything that was shared. What were some of the big points you guys got into when you actually did the discussion? Again, a great way to get our learners, you know, thinking about things just beyond the surface level of here's what you need to know, getting them to think a little bit more deeply about topics. Our third strategy for the connection category is called headlines. The purpose of this strategy is to synthesize topics. That is an incredibly difficult skill. It sounds simple enough. The strategy sounds simple enough, but this skill of synthesizing, of encapsulating is very challenging and requires a lot of higher level thinking. So here's how headlines works. You are going to identify some kind of stopping point. So you might say, at the end of the lecture today, I'm going to stop. At the end of the semester, maybe across a 3-week period, I'm going to identify some stopping point that makes sense. And at that stopping point, you're going to ask your learners to write a headline, think like newspaper, magazine, online article, write a headline about the core ideas that you took away about this topic. Um, it requires them to take, like, a lot of learning, right, from an hour, from 3 weeks. It takes them from all that information to really synthesize it down to one headline, which, again, is it's a challenging skill. It's not easy. Um, then once learners have their headlines, there are some different things you could do. You could just kind of anyone want to share their headlines, ask for examples. You could also choose two different stopping points, maybe at the end of lecture on Monday and at the end of the next Monday's lecture, you have them write headlines both times. And then you might ask them, look at your two headlines on the same topic. Look at how it evolved. Can anyone share how their headlines evolved as they got more information? They might revise their headlines based on new information they learn. Something I really like doing is having them submit their headlines. It's a nice kind of informal assessment. It could be a Google form or, a scrap of paper as you walk out, drop it on the table. Um, it's a really nice way to get an idea of what were the takeaways. People could put their names on them if you want to make it something that you're associating with names or not. And it's also a really great way for, me as the instructor to check in on what were the big takeaways that my learners left with today. Were the objectives that I had in my mind met, or were they taking other things from it? And then revisiting those things as needed in the next lecture, again, if needed.
Our last category of strategies are called the catalyst strategies. And these strategies are really meant to motivate and engage your learners in ways that helps them feel connected and be part of a community. And by setting intentions and goals for our classrooms, the way we embrace the uniqueness of every group we teach, of every section we teach each semester, really helps us with these catalyst strategies. So we're going to look at three different strategies today. The first one is build community. The second one, promote learner success. And the third one, modular teaching. And so this first strategy, build community, is really meant to foster connectedness. And there are lots of ways that you can build community in your classroom, but here are just a few. You can arrive to class early so that you can greet your learners as they're walking in and have that idle chit chat before you begin class to get to know them. You can work with ways at the beginning of class to capture their attention. So maybe you want to start class by asking a question for them to wonder about. Maybe you want to share a story or a shocking statistic, just so that they get focused in on the learning for that day. I've seen some faculty play music that's related to the theme of the concept of that day.
Yeah.
So as this learners are walking in, they get into that music, and then sometimes learners would be dancing and things. It was quite interesting to see. So just think about all those ways that you can capture their attention, so they can kind of let go of whatever they walk through the door worrying about or thinking about, and get situated into what you want them to learn for that particular day. For empowering learners, this is where you really remind our learners that they are in this field to make a difference, and what they're learning is going to make a difference in the world. I think they know that going into this profession, but it's also nice to be reminded. So do that. Empower them to remember that they're going to make a difference in the world, and how they're going to do that. The next idea is keep overarching purpose of a class in view. So in this case, it's about maybe writing the goals of the day on the board, like we've done in the back of the room, or that were posted in the chat for those online. Maybe it's verbally. So maybe you didn't have a marker in the classroom you were teaching in that day, but you can still say it out loud so that the learners are thinking about what they're supposed to be thinking about and focusing on what they're supposed to be focusing on for that particular session. And then really, it goes without saying the last one, but show enthusiasm for your discipline so that that is infectious and contagious in a positive way, so that your learners hopefully will find your topic as fascinating as you do. Anybody who has gone to a Canvas training knows that I am like the biggest Canvas cheerleader when I train. So hopefully that excitement and enthusiasm for the tool comes across in the training so that you also are willing to give it a shot and learn about all the cool things that it can do as well. All right, the next one in our catalyst category is promote learner success. And for this one, you are really going to be transparent about your course expectations. So things like giving students specific feedback that includes how they can improve and giving them those instructions of how they can do better will help ensure their success. You could ask students that you currently have to write letters to the next group of students, to have them literally right out of from a student perspective say, look, this is what you got to do to get an Amos class. This is what you got to do to get honors. This is what you have to do to pass. This is, this is the thing that drives this professor crazy. Don't do this. Whatever it is, get it right from the learners and then collect those letters and then literally put them on desks the first day of the next semester, so that the person who sits there can read what somebody else said. And then you could even do the +1 thing and start passing them around, and so that they can learn from the learners who have gone before, so to speak. And then the last one, tips for success, comes from you. What do you see as what the students need to do to be successful? So, maybe you want to put that right in your syllabus or put it right in Canvas and refer to it. So if you know that there is something very concrete, very specific that a learner can do to do well in your class, tell them. They shouldn't have to guess where the bullseye is. Tell them. And then they're going to be more successful and more engaged along the way because they're spending their mental energy learning as opposed to learning about what they need to do or how they're supposed to do it to be successful. So then the last category for Catalyst, or the last strategy, excuse me, for Catalyst is modular teaching. And in this strategy, you're using novelty to stimulate focus and attention. And so how you do that is really with changing up how you run your class. So it might be incorporating some of these small instructional strategies just to break up your lecture. In essence, if you try to switch up what you're doing in your classroom every 15 to 20 minutes, your learners are going to be more likely to stay engaged, be paying attention, not pulling out their phones, not daydreaming, not thinking about what they're going to have for dinner, or whatever. Um, so just by mixing it up, you're going to be more successful in keeping their attention.
Dr. McCauley, I would add this falls right in line with what we tell faculty about recording your lectures. Your lecture shouldn't be more than 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And if you've got a lecture that's an hour, well, then it should be 3 20-minute videos. It falls within this idea of you got about 20 minutes before people start getting fancy. So you want to move, ebb and flow, just like you do in videos.
Exactly. And if you think about one of your class sessions, to piggyback on that, as you think about how you're going to chunk your day or chunk your lesson with your learners, maybe you're going to start out with a lecture. Then in 15 to 20 minutes, you're going to insert a what makes you say that, one of the strategies we learned today. Then you might do a +1, so they have a chance to write it all down and check each other and make sure they've got comprehensive notes. Then you might do another lecture segment for another 15 to 20 minutes. Then you might do a clicker quiz so you can check for understanding. I lecture some more. And then you might end the class with predicting so they can kind of think about what's coming next. And just by mixing it up, you're going to keep your learners more engaged and also help them learn actually much better than if we just lectured straight through.
Thank you for watching today's Teaching with Technology Brown Bag. You can view all Teaching with Technology Brown Bags on the USU YouTube channel under the full ETI playlist. Have a nice day.